Pride and ego are part of the human nature. And until we are translated, until Jesus comes again, my hunch is that we're going to struggle with this very real issue called humility. The third item that is important to me has to do with honesty. This is a core value that talks about certainly telling the truth, but it also talks about being trustworthy. Yes, I want people to trust me. When I say I'm going to be somewhere, I'll be there. When I say I'll be there at 9 o'clock, I'll be there at 9 o'clock. If I'm going to be late, I'll call ahead and say I've been delayed, but I should be there at 9:15. You get the idea. You want to be a reliable person, one that can be depended upon. How many times do we find ourselves in challenging situations where we may have actually messed up a little bit, but we don't want to admit it? Why? We're too proud to admit that we made a mistake. So it's easy for us to let people think that it was my secretary that made the mistake. It was someone else's fault. No, there are times when we must say, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. Do you know what happens when a leader admits that they're human? Rather than diminishing your influence, it actually increases it. People are more likely to trust you when they know that you're willing to admit a problem, a mistake, something that you have not done effectively or well. Romans 12 says, don't think of yourselves higher than you ought to, but according to God's view of your life. Are you being honest with others in your dealing with them? Honest with your promises? Honest with your verbal communication? Honest with your finances? Are you ever tempted to take advantage of someone? In fact, to stretch your money or the Lord's money so far that you really are invading someone else and making it difficult for them. No, wait a minute. If these are people that you care about, that you want to build relationships with, that might, in fact, ultimately result in an interest in God and His church, you want to preserve those relationships. Don't push the bargain so hard that you make enemies. Do you trust? Are you trustworthy in your finances? Are you honest with your spouse? Are you honest with God? Honesty takes many different aspects. Another word for this might be considered authenticity. You're the genuine article. Certainly there have been times when you bought something, took it home thinking you had the real deal, only to find out it was a cheap imitation. How does that make you feel? You feel like you've been betrayed. It wasn't right. So if we're one thing in public and something else in private, are we genuine? Are we authentic? No. We must be the same all the time, in all settings. Trustworthy, honest, reliable, genuine leaders. That extends your influence. And your willingness to admit a mistake is not a sign of weakness, it's a sign of strength. A fourth item, and David has been talking about this a lot, service. As a leader, are you committed to serve? You know how most of us are oriented toward that pyramid of leadership, where the higher you go, the more power you have. But Jesus' model turned that pyramid upside down, didn't it? So that you descend into leadership, your willingness to serve other people more fully, more genuinely. It's not just putting on something, you're there to really help. Now bear in mind, this area of life is difficult, it's challenging, and there are times when your own motives can't be trusted. You might do the right thing, but for the wrong reason. Imagine that you're with me, and I'm hurrying to a very important appointment, and it's raining. And you notice there's a car beside the road. It's night. The car has its hood up. There's a woman standing beside the car. That happened to me a while back. I was just leaving an appointment where many of our church members had gathered, and I'm on my way home. I want to get there. It's a long drive home, 3 hours. I want to get there. It's 9:30, 10 o'clock at night. My first impulse, drive right by. I'm in a hurry. I've got a place to go. It's dark. It may be dangerous. It's certainly inconvenient. And then the thought goes through my mind, what if that's one of my members? Well, I should help if it's one of my members. So now am I helping because I just want to help, or am I helping because I'm concerned about my reputation? Do you see how ego is creeping in? I ended up stopping. The woman was just a decoy. The man got out of the car, said, my car won't start. Do you have jumper cables? I had to turn around in a very busy place, help him get the car started, and trying to reach over and hook up the jumper cables. He started his car finally. It was throwing oil all over my shirt. I ended up a mess. I found myself resentful. Why? I stopped to help. No, it wasn't one of my members. Should that matter? If I really was motivated by kindness and a desire to serve, I wouldn't be worried about some of those things. Now, granted, you don't have time and energy for everything. You must use your own judgment and allow God's Spirit to speak to you about how involved you get in the world around you. My point is, as leaders, do we ever descend to serve? As we talked about this among my colleagues, we ultimately concluded most of what we do is known by the people that we work with. They know who we are, and many times people will refer to me as Mr. President. How does that make me feel? Well, you could call me by my name. My name is Ed. The position is not all that important. It's a temporary thing, isn't it? I'm not going to be a president forever. I'm Ed. I'll always be Ed. But we realized that most of our interaction with people was somehow tainted or contaminated by this positional difference. People wouldn't accept me for who I am and what I would like to do. And so we agreed as a staff, we're going to spend some time, you decide how much time, we're all going to spend some time serving anonymously. We're going to find some organization in our city that needs volunteers. We're just going to show up and volunteer. No title. Yeah, I'll give you my name. My name is Ed. But you don't have to know who I am, what I do, what my title might be. I'm just here to help in this thrift store. One of my colleagues decided to go to a men's shelter and help them. Another went to the community kitchen that was just feeding homeless people. We can all find some way to serve. Why are we doing that? To test whether or not this is really a part of our character, to remind us to go against the flow of always thinking of ourselves and what will move us forward, and to really say, am I genuine? Do I care about other people? And Lord, remind me, if I'm a little sensitive about this, if I'm uncomfortable because things didn't go my way, that's ego creeping in. No, I've got to keep asking Him, Lord, speak to me. Show me what's below the waterline of my character and keep working on me until I am more Christ-like. Would you agree? Number 5, on my list anyway, and that is dependence. I don't mean I'm dependent on my mother for finances. I don't mean that I'm dependent on my wife for my emotional well-being, although I'm dependent on many people. I mean dependence on God. And to the degree that I'm not dependent on God, I am tempted to do things in my own strength, trusting my own gifts, my own intellect, my ability to wing it, we call it, where I'll just take care of this myself. And for those of us that are good at talking, we can talk our way into lots of things. If we have charisma, if we're gregarious, we enjoy people, we feel somehow that we don't need God quite as much. Sorry. That's in the way, isn't it? In truth, how much do we need God? We need Him every day. In fact, Jesus said in that very famous parable He gave about the vine and the branches, who's the vine? Is it us? No. It's Jesus. We are one of the branches. As long as we are connected to Him, as long as we are dependent on Him for nourishment, for power, for energy, for strength, as long as we're connected to Him, there is life. But as soon as we become disconnected from Him, we wither and die. So the truth is, the more I depend on my own strength, my own capacity, my own ability, the less I tend to depend on Him. The more I depend on myself, the less I pray. You want to know how much you depend on Jesus? How much do you pray? That is when you test coming before the Lord saying, Father, I don't know what to do about this. You're going to have to guide me and lead me. I read somewhere Martin Luther said, I pray every day, except those days when I'm really busy, then I pray 3 times as much. I tend to do it just the opposite. If I don't have a heavy day, I'll spend more time with God. I'll pray a little bit more. But I'm so busy today, I'll skip that part of it. What am I saying? Thank you, Jesus. I don't need you today. I'll do this on my own. That's not dependence, is it? Now, these are 5 character qualities that are important to me. You may have your own list. You should have your own list. They may be informed by passages like Galatians 5. What are the fruits of the Spirit in Galatians 5, verse 22? The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness. We know these things, don't we? But are they a part of our characters? Goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Whatever you do, I would encourage you to spend some time reflecting on those character traits that are most important to you. And as you bring this before God and ask Him to develop within you those character traits that He most wants in you, you will then begin defining your own core values. The values that will direct your ship. It's much like the keel that keeps it upright and the rudder that steers it in the right direction. Your core values will help you make decisions and get you through the tough periods of life, and they will be important to you only to the degree that you itemize them, become clearly aware of them, root them in Scripture and God's Word, pray about them regularly. You too can be a leader of influence because you're a leader of character. I suppose we could say, you could summarize all of these other things in this one right here. I want to become more like Jesus. So this would be a summary of what I believe is important for the character of a leader. Now let's transition and talk for a few moments about the priorities of a leader. Because for all of us, there are usually too many things to do and not enough time to do them. Does that sound familiar? So if you can't do everything, how do you decide what things to do? Several years ago, I came across a decision-making matrix that has been very helpful to me. And the author was describing, anytime we're struggling with priorities, what to do with limited resources of time or money or energy, there are several things to keep in mind. One is urgency. The other is importance. You know the difference? What are the urgent things in your life? Well, it's the phone call that demands your help right now. It's the person that walks into your office saying, "You'll never believe it, but the plans have changed. You're not doing what you wanted to do tomorrow. You're going to the Kowloon Church to be a part of a seminar like this." All of a sudden, you had no idea that this was going to be a part of your life until here you are. It's urgent because David and I aren't going to be here next week. That might have been more convenient for you, not so possible for us. So how do you sort through this collision of urgent versus important? I don't know about you, but many times I find my life driven by the urgent, the crisis. There's a problem. I can solve it. There's a decision that needs to be made. I need to be a part of it. There's something else going on over here. It just can't happen without my presence. Urgent things. Are they the most important things? So here's the decision-making matrix. They said, divide up your decisions and let's plot them like this. Here is the important and the urgent. We'll call this a quadrant 1 situation. If I get a phone call that my wife is in the emergency room at the hospital, does that qualify? She is important to me, and this is urgent. I will drop everything else that I'm doing, say, "I'm sorry, I realize we had an appointment, I'm sorry, this is an important obligation to me, I'm sorry, but you understand, I must go to the hospital right now for my wife's emergency." Same thing happens if there's a mechanical problem with my car. Most of my appointments are kept by driving to them. If my car stops running, it suddenly becomes a quadrant 1 problem. It's both important and urgent. But there aren't that many things that fall into this category. Let's be honest. A few, and we must be sensitive to them, but not everything. What about this quadrant? These are things that are important, but not urgent. We'll call this a quadrant 2 situation. Can you think of an important issue in your life? Well, what about your personal health? Is that important to you? Yes. I'm guessing it's more important to those of us that are getting older. When you're young, you're just automatically healthy. But now I'm realizing I must take care of my health. Nobody else is going to do that for me. No one is calling me saying, "Quick, you've got to take care of your health." It's not urgent, but it's very important. And if my health is compromised, if I ignore the issues of my health until I have a heart attack and go to the hospital, what happens then? All of a sudden, my health is now important and urgent, and it takes over everything else. I may even lose my ability to do other important things because of this urgent crisis. Unfortunately, no one controls this quadrant except you. Now, most of our life, if we're honest about it, is down here in quadrant 3. These are things that are not important, but they are urgent. That's the phone call, the interruption, the someone else's crisis. Their lack of planning becomes your problem today. They could have called you last week, but no, they waited until now and said, "Quick, I need this, I need that, can you help me?" There is a time to be responsive. And if we're going to be kind, if we're going to be unselfish, we will, many times, act in these areas. That is appropriate. But if you're not careful, this will control your life. It takes over your life. What do we find down here in quadrant 4? Well, you can guess, can't you? These are things that are not important and not urgent. But I'm guessing all of us spend some time there, right? You get home at night. You've had a long day. It's 9 o'clock. You simply want to relax. So you start thumbing through WeChat, catching up with friends. It's fun. Not really urgent. Not important. Just a way to relax. Way to stay connected. Sometimes we turn on the television. Not because we want to see anything, because we must see anything, not because there's anything urgent or important on. We're simply trying to relax. Many things can fall into this quadrant, and there are appropriate times to relax. Don't get me wrong. Once in a while, you need to simply allow your spirit to be renewed by good friendship, laughter, sitting around, lingering over the meal longer than you otherwise would. It's not urgent. It's not all that valuable and important, but it's good for the soul. It's good for the spirit. So make room for some of this as well. Why am I saying all of this? The priorities of a leader are going to be, yes, how can we more effectively manage these things, knowing when and how to say no to otherwise legitimate requests that come to us? So how can we manage this? How can we maximize this? In other words, what are the things that I must take responsibility to incorporate into my life? No one else is going to suggest it. I must take care of these things to prolong my effectiveness and to increase my influence. That's important to us, isn't it? What is one of the first things that comes to your mind in terms of important but not urgent? We've talked about it several times between David, myself. As a Seventh-day Adventist Christian leader, what should be one of the first things we care about every day? My time with God. My own spiritual health must be my number one priority. David has referenced it. I'm reminding you of it. No one else is going to take responsibility for this in terms of your life. Yes, you may be a part of a great church like David's that encourages you to take some of these steps, and that's wonderful, but ultimately, you determine how much time you're going to spend in God's Word. You determine how much of a priority prayer is going to be in your life. Should it be the first thing in the morning, the last thing at night? Take a time in the middle of the day when you're fully awake? Where do you go? What do you do? It's got to become specific to you. Number one. What is my second responsibility as a Christian leader? Is it to my work responsibilities? After all, I'm working for the church. I want to be faithful to the call. What is my number two responsibility? Well, let me show you a picture. This will give you a clue. On June 16, 1974, I married that beautiful woman, Marilyn. Do you think she should be an important priority in my life? Important. Once in a while, she becomes urgent. But many times, because she's such a selfless person, she allows me to get very involved in many good things. And I must tell you, it was not long after this picture was taken. You see, I was in ministry before I got married. So I had a pattern. I was on a roll. I was busy. Right. Busy with what I thought were important things. And some of them truly were important, but still, I was very busy. Eventually, she sat me down and said, Ed, what's more important to you? Your ministry or your marriage? All of a sudden, That's an urgent and important question, isn't it? I realized that I was wounding her spirit by not giving her time and attention. And so we agreed early in our marriage that at least one night of every week would just be the two of us. We're going to go on a date. We're going to go out to eat. We'll stay home. We'll read a book. We'll go on a walk. Whatever we want to do, but it's just the two of us. That was an important discussion to have. Well, time passed, and pretty soon, God gave us two little boys. And again, the pace of life picks up, and I was now in different responsibilities. But it wasn't long before this same very patient woman, this godly woman named Marilyn, had another little conversation with me, saying, these two little boys that are growing up in a pastor's home, do you want them to resent your ministry or to support your ministry? That question brought it to the urgent and important level. We began talking. So how's this going to work? What would it look like? How would I go about prioritizing little boys? I remembered how my dad spent time with me. I realized time is a critical gift. And so we made a commitment. When the boys were about this age, I went to both of them. At that point, my calendar was in a big book. You know, you hauled it around with you everywhere you went. And I said, guys, we're going to start something. I'm going to give both of you one afternoon a month. Let's look at the calendar. You choose the day, and you decide what we're going to do. What do you mean? Their eyes get real big. What do you mean? We can do anything we want? Yeah, as long as it doesn't cost a lot of money. But you know, that didn't bother them. They didn't want me to spend money on them. They wanted attention. I said, we'll do anything you want. They began to call that their special day. Dads, when's my next special day? Well, let's see. Let's look at the calendar. Here it is. Now, were there times when that commitment to my oldest son, Nolan, for instance, were there times when that conflicted with some other request? Someone said, could we get together on that Thursday afternoon? What would my response be? No, I'm sorry. I'm already committed. Can we do it the next week? Or another day, or whatever the case might be. Few people ever questioned my commitment, and I didn't go out of my way necessarily to say, I'm sorry, I'm going to be playing baseball with my son. I just said, I'm busy, I'm committed. Because those boys are important to me. Maybe not urgent to everybody else, but they're important to me, and no one else is going to prioritize them the way I can and should. Well, time went by, and the family began to grow. Now you can see that with 4 children, I gave each one of them one special day. That was, an afternoon, and after a while that's after school, so it's just a couple of hours, but one each week. So at least one afternoon of every week, I was playing with one of my kids. And I can tell you, there were times when I was very sensitive to what people might think. What if my members see me playing at the park, riding bicycles? Everybody sees you when you're riding bicycles in a small town. Well, maybe that will give me an opportunity to explain why I'm riding bicycles with my daughter instead of studying for next Sabbath sermon or attending another committee. And there were a few people that actually approached me and said, Pastor, I saw you riding bikes with your daughter. I want to tell you I'm proud of you for taking time with your family. Family is one of the only things that you control. And as Ellen White said, it is our first work. As pastors, it is our first work. More important than the responsibilities that you carry for the church is your commitment to your family. Well, time has gone by. The family has grown. Now these kids are getting married and having their own kids. And you can see it just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Now that picture was taken 2 years ago We were all together on a rare occasion, because we're spread out across 4 different states right now, all together, taking a picture before we went to church where we all sat together. Do you know how good it feels to have your family with you in church? Because they believe. In fact, 2 of them have spent time in Peru, South America, as medical missionaries. Another one has planted a church close to them. These are kids that are passionate about Jesus and sharing Jesus with their friends. One of them is a pastor himself. That's a wonderful gift. Now, don't get me wrong. Not every child is going to make God-honoring decisions just because you prioritize them, just because you gave them focused time and attention, just because you had family worship. You can't raise kids by a formula. This is not engineering a family. This is doing all you can to provide an atmosphere in which they know they're loved, they're a priority, they're important to you and to God. And now, my influence is amplified many times because of these people who are taking it to the next generation. Who knows where that will lead? I beg you, those of you that have families, make your family a priority. Now, the good news is, since then, 2 more babies have been born. This is the last one. My wife, my daughter, my granddaughter, she's only 3 months old, and right now there's a big hurricane going through Florida and Georgia. They've been evacuating further north. Now they're all at my house, and I'm not there. But they take pictures and they send them to me. And I talk to them any chance I get. These are important people to me. Can you tell? You have a family. If you have a family, make this a priority. Important to you, more than anyone else, God's expectation that you would be a good steward of that He's entrusted to you. And it starts in your home. What are some other things that are important quadrant 2 items in your life? Well, I would suggest that one of them is going to be your own professional growth. Yes, you came to this event probably because you were encouraged to do so. I hope it is helpful to you. But there are probably other things that you know you would benefit by learning more about finance, about young people and what makes them make decisions, what attracts them to church. Preaching. Is there a better way to deliver a message? Maybe to invite a response? Are there more effective ways of evangelism? There are 1,000 different things that we can do, we can learn to grow. And so you'll want to look out for specific seminars or journals or books. I hope you're reading constantly to grow your own mind. We call that sharpening the saw. Because our own energy is going to be blunted with time. We constantly need to be finding better ways to renew ourselves. And just redoubling our efforts is not always the most effective way. Just as when the chainsaw hits the dirt, it gets dull. I might keep pushing on the log, and the harder I push, the more smoke it creates, but it doesn't cut the log. I must stop, sharpen the blade, and then it cuts through the wood. Spend some time away from your responsibilities to sharpen your saw. Amplify, get better at what God has already gifted you to do. So your own professional growth, scholarship is important. Another kingdom growth activity, everything that David has been talking about, the passionate outreach into the community. That is important, would you agree? But it's not urgent. And so too many churches focus on the urgent. Fixing the roof. Needs to be fixed. It's dripping on the pews. We've got to do something. What should we do? How are we going to raise the money? It can take a lot of time. That's one of these things. Well, it is important. Now it's a crisis because it's deferred maintenance. We didn't do it when we should have, perhaps. So now it's a crisis, taking a lot of our attention when really we should be thinking about how are we going to be more effective at reaching our community for Jesus. Kingdom growth is your responsibility. Nobody else's. Another item, at least for those of you that are in pastoral ministry, sermon preparation. You can become so busy doing many good things. Home visitation, hospital visitation, Bible studies, strategic planning with this committee or that committee, meeting with the finance committee. There's many good things that you could be doing, but when Sabbath morning comes, if you haven't prepared a message that goes deep into God's Word, that speaks to the human heart, that invites a response, you've disappointed God. You have squandered an opportunity. You must protect time, quality time, to prepare a message. Sermon preparation, your responsibility. No one else will tell you, Pastor, have you spent enough time preparing the sermon? Oh, after the message, they might wonder, but nobody else is going to encourage you. You must do that yourself. Time management. Now, just knowing this little piece will help you with your time management, right? It helps decide what things are actually going to end up in my calendar. The things that end up in your calendar, you're committed to attending. What happens if you say you're going to be someplace and don't show up? Your credibility is compromised. You've proven yourself not as trustworthy as you should. So if you've made a commitment to do something, do it. Follow through. But there are going to be some things that will never make it to your calendar because they didn't pass this test. So how do you manage your time? I don't know. I've experimented with lots of different systems over the years. It used to be that I carried a little pocket calendar with me, and there was a calendar at my workplace on my desk, or maybe my secretary had a calendar. And then my wife had a calendar in her purse, and there was one on the refrigerator. And there were times when I didn't honestly know, wait a minute, I thought I was supposed to do something today, but what? So I'd have to call several different people to find out, where am I supposed to be today? No, you should have one calendar, all right? One calendar. Nowadays, that's fairly easy. You know, most of us carry around a cell phone, a smartphone, that has the capability of synchronizing many different calendars. My calendar is open to my secretary. She can add things to my calendar. All of the 5 vice presidents that I'm on a team with, they all have access to my calendar as well. They can see where I'm going to be all the time, including date nights with my family, weekends off. They know all of that. I'm not sure that we're benefited by keeping secrets in some of these things. Be open. Be authentic. So, allow everyone to have access to your calendar that needs it, and then once an appointment is on that calendar, keep it. Very important. For a long time, I focused more on time management than anything else. Then a few years ago, I read a book on energy management. And I realized that's probably more important than time management. Time you can control to a certain degree. But energy management has to do with you recognizing which of those appointments on your calendar are going to be energizing to you, which of them will bring renewal and new life, and which will be draining. Some are naturally draining. So if you see that on your calendar is one of those events that you almost dread because it just takes it all out of you, you find yourself exhausted and spent afterwards, you see it on your calendar, it's 2 weeks away. What are you going to do? Block out some time either before or after that event to renew your spirit, your emotions, your health. Did you hear me? So you're strategically planning your life. And when you see heavy, demanding things, allow for time either for recovery afterwards or for preparation beforehand. That may mean a little extra sleep, a little extra exercise, whatever it might be, managing your nutrition, all the stuff that you know you've got to do to keep your energy reserves high. Managing your energy is just as important as managing your time. I think there are ways to do that. We mentioned health in passing, but certainly no one else is going to guard your health as much as you will. Are you getting enough exercise? Are you sleeping enough? Do you realize the dangers of going without sleep? Dangers to yourself and your own health, but also dangers to others because your judgment becomes impaired. Your balance isn't as good. You fall. You have more accidents. Yes, you have more accidents when you lose more sleep. We need sleep. So between exercise, sleep, diet, all the things that we know as Seventh-day Adventists who pride ourselves on health, typically, that's something that you have to pay attention to. Other people aren't going to make that decision for you. Yes, we could go on. There are many other things that I'd like to mention, but this is perhaps enough for now. Bottom line, as a leader, we know that we'll never have time enough to do everything. You'll never return every phone call as you should, write every letter that you could, be as appreciative as you ought to be to those around you. You'll never make every visit. You'll never put quite as much time into that message or the presentation as you should. You'll never do it quite good enough. So you're going to have to become selective. Make sure you're doing the important stuff. Do your best to manage those things that aren't quite as important, but still need to get done. Does that make sense? I pray that God will give you wisdom because these choices, intensely personal, but they affect many people around you. I want you to be a God-honoring leader who is effective in managing your priorities. Let's take a break.